Good afternoon. Today we're talking about discipline and why you need it more than motivation. So, of course, if you are joining me, tuning in, you know the scores. Drop your comments, questions, thoughts. I will catch up with them afterwards and, of course, join you and answer your questions because that's what it's here for. That's what it's here for. So, obviously, if you are with me, we're going to be live about 15 minutes and we're going to stay focused on discipline. So we all know what motivation is. If not, let's get into some clarifications to begin and so we know exactly where we're kicking off. Okay, so what is the difference between motivation and discipline? Okay, so really, motivation is the thing that gets us started. So when we find something that we want, so for example, when you're hungry, what's the motivation? It's the fact you're hungry. Okay, so that sounds quite obvious, quite simple, but that's kind of what our motivation is in life. We find something that we want for whatever reason, and that's what gets us going. So automatically when you're hungry, your motivation is the hunger. You want to feed yourself. So what gets you going to go and get some food is that. What happens when you first walk up to the first place that's closed? It's not the motivation that keeps you going, because you could go, I just give up and go home. I've got something in the fridge. Or I'll just go there. Okay. It's the fact that discipline in your mind, you've got the fact, I'm going to do this. Okay. And that's what keeps you going. So that's a kind of a brief description about it. So of course you've got kind of guys that have got the idea of which one is which, right? But as we're coming to the end of the year, just move my mic slightly. I'm going to elbow it in a minute otherwise. As we're coming to the end of the year, there are people probably reflecting on goals, looking at how we've been doing, and also planning ahead for the new year and things that we want to achieve for the new year. So, okay, so we'll probably look at it right now. You might be going, oh, I didn't do that last year. I didn't do this. And look at things you probably didn't do. Okay, so let's first off shut off that negative mindset. Let's look at the things we did do and the things that we still want. Because remember, we've still got, I said 19 days until the end of the year. So we've still got just over 2 weeks where we can actually make a difference. It might be a small one, but we can start moving forwards. Right? Now, that also gives us the chance to move forward in a way that sets us off to kick off 2023 on that high note that we want to sell through the year. So that whatever goals that we have, we set ourselves up to work for them. So it doesn't hit January 1st and we think, oh, I need a goal, I need to set something, I need to focus on something. It doesn't hit lastminute.com. Remember, we try and plan the night before so we know what's planning for the day ahead. We close our books on a Friday so we know that we're not waking up to any surprises on Monday, except whatever's new, right? So what is discipline? Okay, discipline is the thing that keeps you going, like we've said, okay, but it's the internal force. So when you wake up on a cold, dark, wet morning and you're like, oh, I gotta go training, or I've got to go to work, or I've got to do whatever it is that is happening in your day, it is that thing that keeps you driving forwards, right? Okay, now if you haven't got one or the other, okay, we'll come into that as well, because you need both. Now the reason I'm saying that, we'll get into, all right, but ideally we're going to focus now on discipline. You know what the difference is. We'll go into why you need, what discipline really gives you, how to sort of put it into force in your life, and then we'll look at why you need the two. Okay, because if you have one and not the other, you'll only go so far. So stay with me. Okay, so make sure I get all my notes right. Okay, so obviously our disciplines are our driving force. It's a thing that's going to push us and keep us going, right? So if you find something hard, okay, or you say you're working to a weight loss goal, or say it's a new career, or maybe finishing a project, okay, it doesn't matter really what the goal is. If you're working towards something and say something doesn't go quite right, right? Now, motivation is still kind of there. However, it's easy to see when things aren't going right to actually quit or just go, okay, it's obviously not meant to be, I'll just give up, right? But none of us want to quit. We want to actually achieve something. When you set a goal, it's not so much the fact how you get there, it's the fact you want that goal, all right? So we shouldn't be quitting, right? So we need that discipline to keep going. So it's our driving force, it's our inner strength, it's the thing that keeps us in focus and set, okay? So it's our inner strength. All right. So when we're looking at driving for accomplishing our goals, we can set various things within our day and our weeks to help us keep going. So what can this look like? Okay, so if you're somebody who keeps a very structured diary, one of the things you could do is actually structure in and say what the times are, right? You could, like, for example, I do it, my diary, some weeks when I know I've been out of habit and I know I've got a busy week, I actually book in my gym slots. Okay, all but my Sunday morning. My Sunday morning is always there. But I actually book out my time. So I kind of commit to it. I make it a commitment. Okay. So you can either use your diaries if you're very proactive with your diary, or again, the idea of booking a class or booking with a friend to go training or a trainer. Okay. You can use something that gives you a level of commitment to that. Okay. Now, when we put any sort of financial side to it, there's always a little bit more give because you've got the risk of losing something. And when we get afraid of losing something, then of course we kind of go, I've got to do this. So there's a little bit more of a driver. Yeah. But our discipline is the thing that keeps us sticking with it. So we can form a structure in our day to keep us going. Okay. But then you can still wake up, it'd be cold, it'd be dark, and you're like, yeah, I want to do this. It's in my diary, but you know what? Little chimp brain comes out and argues with you. It's the discipline and strength within you to go, I've committed to this and I can do it. So that leads me on to part 2. So you can have a commitment in a diary with an appointment with, like I said, friend, calendar, whatever, trainer. But then it's the sort of the affirmations. Okay, so we use affirmations a lot in terms of positivity and positive thinking, but it can be a driving force for our discipline as well, right? So there are times, I use them. I actually, it's kind of the self-talk. So if you've ever spoken to yourself, you may have used some of these. It's sometimes I'm just like, yeah, I could go later and all this. It's like, yeah, but if I go later, and I sometimes have this conversation with myself, but I close it down by using my affirmations and going, no, go to the gym now. It'll be done. Even if you do 20 minutes, you're going to feel so much better for it. And you're going to just do X, Y, Z as your minimum. Literally. And that's it. I give myself a baseline, I give myself a standard, and I sort of work to it. So using an affirmation of going, I can do this, and being sort of strong and authoritative, kind of like you're telling yourself in some ways, because sometimes it's easy if someone else tells us what to do. Okay. When we tell ourselves, it's kind of like, actually, I can leave that, but they've told me, so I've got to do that. So try and put yourself in the other person. Just be like, yeah, no. I set this standard for myself. I'm holding myself to my standards. Right? There you go, number 3. See, notice how it's flowing. All by accident. But this is how we sort of keep going. And I can tell you guys, when I used to fence, okay, so when I was a teenager, I used to fence for Great Britain. I qualified for the Olympics. I went to 4 World Championships. I qualified the Euros, European Championships, that is. I competed all over Europe and, of course, obviously the States and all this, nationally and internationally. Okay, at the age of 13, I had my full British colours. Okay, so I'm kind of saying, I was lucky and blessed in one way because I was part of the first women's sabre team. So I was initially it was mixed. So, of course, it's first women. So that did assist. But because I was committed to it, I obviously was able to progress. Okay. It's the same when I played hockey. At the same time, I got selected for the local hockey club because I used to go to practice and I committed to it. Right. Now, you can say, okay, you're a teenager. The things that keep you going is your mum kicking you out the door in the morning. And of course, when it was the 6 a.m. trainings, there was a little bit of my mother dragging me out of bed and the grumpy teenager. She loved me. But it was the fact I actually maintained a training diary. And in fact, recently, when I moved, I actually cleared it out because I still had it, which I was very surprised about. But I maintained a training diary, so I committed to the times I was training. Okay, so there was a minimum requirement that I had to do. Okay, there was also the requirement, okay, to stay in the squad. The commitment was that my school grades didn't drop. So bear in mind, when I went to the World Championships, I was 15, nearly turning 16. It was my GCSE year. Okay, so this is the last year of sort of committed school. And I had to get my grades. Okay, I knew I wasn't going to be an A-star student. Okay, at the time, I didn't realize I was dyslexic, and that probably was why. But if I let my grades drop substantially, or rather than what was discussed on performance, then of course I would be kicked off the squad. So I wouldn't have gone to those championships. And then, of course, I would have gone to the World Championships like a few months later. Okay. So you have this commitment and discipline. It's a case of, okay, well, I don't want to go to school because school's boring. And, how many 15-year-olds want to go to school? But I wanted to play sports. But the commitment for me to play the sports, I mean, I can play sports and run around all day. It makes me really happy. But the idea was I had to be disciplined in school. So, of course, I had to plan my time in my diary. So, for example, I even went on a local news TV station on the ITV News. So, yes, I was on the news as well. And one of the things they filmed me was sat there doing my homework because they wanted to see that there was this commitment. Okay, it wasn't just I wanted this shiny goal. It wasn't just I was motivated. Okay, the idea of being motivated to go to this amazing thing was like, okay, this is great, I want to do this. But that wasn't what kept me going. It was the serious discipline, setting the time in my diary to go, here we go, to go, okay, I've actually got a goal that actually means something, right? And also then going, what does this need from me? Okay, what is the base requirement? The school, my coach has said, if you drop your grades, you will be off the squad, no questions. And you sit there going, okay, so luckily my squad ends up being 6 till 8. So when I went from school, I would go around town for a little bit, get some food, and then I would sit there and do my homework, because part of the commitment of getting the squad done was get my homework done. And the last thing I wanted to do at 9 o'clock at night was to do my homework. So, of course, my lunch times, if I wasn't training, if I didn't have a fencing lesson pre-massive competition, I would actually sit in the library and do my homework. Okay. And yeah, I was kind of bullied at school a little bit. But then to be in an all-girls school and be so active and sporty, it was kind of anomaly. That was a bit of a weird one. I was for the odd one. So I was a lot more sporty than anyone else and most of the other people. And because of the commitment it required, it put serious pressure onto how my life was. And in fact, a lot of my social life, right? I would always turn friends down at weekends because I knew I had a competition. And although I kind of wanted to go to cinema with my friends, it was like, well, I kind of want to do that big competition in 3 months' time. And to do that, I've got to qualify here. I need the points. So I kind of chose what I said yes or no to. Okay. Now, well, look where we started. Setting the time in our diaries, using the affirmations, saying the things that, yeah, I can do this. Or no, if I do this now, like if I do my homework now, when I go home, I get to watch TV. I was a 15-year-old girl and younger, I was 16 as well. But I got that discipline, right? And these are the things that you sort of go, it's like, okay, so to close it, why we need the two, okay? Because your motivation is the thing that gets you started, okay? If you have something to work towards that really excites you, okay, and that you're passionate about and that you really want to achieve, then of course to stay disciplined along the way is a lot easier. So when you wake up in the dark grey mornings, when you find your boss is being hard at you or somebody's criticizing you, tell you what, a number of people told me, why are you doing that? Okay, you will find that unless you're actually motivated to begin with, finding the discipline to keep going will be a lot harder, right? However, if you've got the right motivation to begin with, as soon as you find yourself coming across that stumbling block, that hard-hitting ground, that you will turn around and find going, it's okay, I can do this because I want that, right? And somehow you find that inner strength in the inner part of your heart, your stomach or something, and that pushes you forwards. So that when you do find yourself at that stumbling block, you go, but I really want that. That means something to me. And this is why we create vision boards. We always reflect back on our goals. So to close you off, guys, as we're closing 2022, it's a magical year, 2022. And we're starting hitting the new year. Let's not lose the discipline, okay? It can be really hard over the darker months. It can be much easier to quit or think you failed and go, I'm going to wait till New Year. Look back at the goals you set, Okay, and try and even take a small step, because there's no harm in carrying goals forward. You just change the time frame that you achieve them in. So you can still achieve something, even if it's just enough to step you off on the right foot on the 1st of January 2023. So guys, fantastic. I've seen loads of comments jumping in. You are absolutely amazing. But I am going to leave you, if my mouse is even working. Oh, yep, there it is. I'm going to leave you to enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and I will see you live again on Thursday.